Welcome to Economics Unbound. Nana and I tonight examine, through the heart and the illuminating light of empathy, the issue of assets and people left stranded and strewn throughout our economy, casualties of economic crime. Now, Nana and I are going to do something quite special today. We're going to hand over the mic pretty often to the South African public to tell their stories of strandedness. Hi, good evening, Nana.
Good evening, everyone. And hi there, Tans. Stranded assets, stranded labor, stranded communities strewn all over the country in the wake of deep-seated corruption. Tans, I wonder if people involved in financial crimes are aware that down the line, the public has to suffer and pick up the bill. Lives are lost, jobs are lost, and opportunities are squandered.
Yes, Nana. When the ambulance service cares more about money than it does about saving lives, when the textbooks are not delivered and students suffer and are stranded, and the pass rate dwindles, futures are stolen in broad daylight, when trains do not fit and those that do are overcrowded, jobs hang in the balance as those trains are late, when miners are left stranded on mine dumps, and mines are abandoned and derelict, the environment suffers and local economies and communities are left bereft and stranded. Hence the title of the show tonight. You guessed it right. Stranded. Stranded assets, stranded people.
Today we hand over the mic to ordinary citizens trying to get to work, to hospital, and to get through school to tell the story of stranded existence in this economy.
We also ask, what is a just transition to a desirable economic state? PRASA railway commuters not happy with the state-owned entity. They are left stranded, frustrated, and some have been sexually violated in these trains. They plead with Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo to hold everyone involved accountable for their failure at PRASA, after evidence in numerous court cases laid bare the extent of corruption, racketeering, maladministration that used to take place at the rail utility. Now let's listen to their story.
We want the Zondo Commission to hold everyone at PRASA accountable for the state capture, for the fraud, and for the mess and trauma that we are going through as commuters, paying clients of theirs.
Mandy commutes between her home and work using the train, but she believes her unpleasant experience almost on a daily basis is the ripple effect of corruption. She says her trip from Kenilworth to Cape Town is supposed to be 20 minutes, but it takes a little over an hour to get her to work. And she adds that the ride is a daily nightmare.
We're not sheep, and what you're basically doing is transporting us in cattle carriages, and that we're not. We're brushing up against each other. There's sexual harassment daily.
Mandy says an efficient process is possible because she and other commuters experienced it during the 2010 FIFA Football World Cup held here in South Africa.
The last time we had any valuable service, any service to actually commend PRASA on, it was during the 2010 International World Cup. They went all out. We had safety on trains, we had boards, electronic boards being put up. We had automated gates at Cape Town Station being put up. It just was amazing. Trains were on time. I don't think in that time we actually ever felt that there were delays. You didn't feel it. You didn't feel the anxiousness. You didn't feel the struggle. You didn't feel the trauma that you daily go through. As soon as that came to an end, everything fell to pieces.
Mandy says the difficult journey she makes every weekday affects her family life negatively. She's calling for peace of mind in the form of public transport that is reliable.
Just give us our basic rights, safety, security, and not to be able to not to have to get to work late and not to have to get home late. We have families, we have lives. Prasa and traveling and our commute is not all there is to life. Get your act together, please, Prasa.
At a Prasa roundtable discussion held earlier this year, the acting CEO Nkosinathi Sishi emphasized the importance of safety compliance with the rail safety regulator. But those words are yet to be turned into practice to make public transport a pleasure for people like Mandy. Notando Makutulela, SABC News, Johannesburg.
TANS, an important story broke as it was reported that doctors and nurses in the Free State and Northwest have accused Buthelezi EMS, the private company contracted to run provincial ambulance services, of operating like a minibus taxi and drop-and-go service. They accuse the company of providing limited medical support. Buthelezi EMS has landed lucrative state tenders worth hundreds of millions to run hospital and clinic transfer services in the Free State and Northwest.
A typical Northwest township, far from emergency medical services, residents say they wait hours before an ambulance arrives during an emergency. We wait for ambulances for up to 5 hours. We wait for hours with sickly people until their conditions worsen. And all you get is that the ambulance is coming, until you make a plan to get a car and transport the patient yourself.
We called the ambulance because my baby was not right. But ambulance took an hour or so to come to us.
I'm sad because we are struggling and I get sick even at night.
The securing of additional ambulances meant a rapid response to medical emergencies. This was soured when a controversial tender was awarded to Buthelezi Emergency Services. This means the process had to be started afresh.
And we believe that the department is ready to start its insourcing, recruiting the EMRS personnel, including the advanced life support and paramedics, and also the buying of the vehicles that will be utilized for EMRs. The whole EMRS services must be the sole responsibility of the Department of Health.
What is more important is that we must follow, the department must follow the proper channels and the proper procedures of getting support from those private companies. But the department has to make sure that it renders those services. We still have a lot of ambulances which were bought by the former MEC. They are still lying there in different institutions which are not being used.
The ailing department is currently under administration. It says it has begun work to limit dependence on external service providers.
Currently, the province has 64 ambulances. It's a far cry from what we want, we agree. We are in the process of procuring additional 46 ambulances and 20 patient transporters as a way of preparing ourselves when Buthelezi and high care phase out.
The department says it needs a budget that's 2 billion rand in excess of its current 11 billion rand budget to meet demands. Sandle Englihihi, SABC News.
Welcome back. Now, the controversial Gupta family, which is alleged to have smuggled billions in taxpayers' money out of South Africa, left many destitute when they left. Employees of a bankrupt mine in Mpumalanga haven't received salaries in almost a year. But now, local mining group Lurco has made an offer for the Koefontein mine, owned by Gupta's Tegeta Exploration Resources Company. Lurco was established in 2010 by businessmen Ellington Nxumalo and Aubrey Chauke.
A BEE company could change the fortunes of thousands of stranded people who were employed by the Gupta-owned mine. Lurco is making moves to buy Gupta's Tegeta Exploration and Resources Company, which in turn is owned by Oak Bay. SABC News tracked some of the people left stranded after the mine closed down.
I worked at coal company mining for 11 years without any problems. I was getting paid and my kids were doing well, not having any problems with strikes. But when the Guptas took over in 2018, to be honest, there wasn't much joy left, because you only rest when you're sleeping from the time that you wake up. You have to figure out how to make things work. Life is so difficult that the kids can also see that it's difficult now, to the point where sometimes they go to school with an empty stomach, forced to understand the situation I'm in now.
Our lives changed when the Guptas took over the mine. If they hadn't taken over the mine, we'll still be fine. But since then, from my side, Guptas took over and life began to change. Normal salary month after month. I get paid on the 15th, but by then the damage has already been done. After that, we just stopped getting paid altogether.
The mine used to supply coal to Eskom, but has not been operational for some time, and many lives were devastated by the closure.
The main company that was operating was Glencore. They said Glencore was to be replaced. Their time had come to an end. When it was time for Glencore to be replaced by Tageta, because it pays better, but it was a lie. Tageta was the one that got us stuck in this mud. We've searched far and wide for them. We've been to their offices in Sandton and some of their offices in Johannesburg called Oak Bay. When we got there, I personally went in. They have an underground office, and we used the stairs to get to them. They've been closed. I was there with the security. All Oak Bay offices are closed. As for now, we are in trouble and we have no idea who will help us out.
Isifiso sethu besingasafisi ukuthi ozobuya athathe le company kube umuntu wangaphandle ngoba mase sicakeka sisuke sesingazi ukuthi fanele.
Our wish is that the next person who takes over the company is not from overseas, because when we run into such issues, we don't know where to go. Everyone points somewhere else from outside the country. What hurts me the most here in South Africa, a year went by and government never came to us with an explanation to say, fine, the Guptas did what they did. They left. Now as a government, here's the plan. Since we are the miners and those mines still have coal, no one is showing up.
Wabese lama permanent ase Optimum athola izimali zawo bawakhipha nge-retrenchment yona netlora thina ama-contractors akukho kitho kwenzekayo.
Black-owned Diversified Commodities Business Group, Loco made a 500 million rand bid for Konfontein mine. According to Business Report Group Chief Executive Ellington Nxumalo, Loco received overwhelming support from creditors to take over the mine. The mine takeover comes just days after the United States announced its blacklist of all Gupta companies. Nothando Makutulela, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Now, earlier we spoke to Ellington Nxumalo from the Loco Group, a mining company which recently made a bid for Koornfontein mine in Mpumalanga.
I think where we are now, I mean, we are in the process, which is basically open and transparent. It's run by a company called Liquidity Services. So we've gone through all the stages, I think, in terms of what they've outlined, in terms of for bidders to participate. So we are now at a stage where we needed to show proof of funds. And then once that stage is passed, then we're going to go to the next stage now, which is now the conclusion of agreements in terms of the acquisition.
Mm-hmm. What kind of funds do you need for an acquisition like this?
Well, I mean, for now, because there's an acquisition, I mean, you know, it's an asset that is owned by another company at the moment. So the first thing that we need to put in now, I mean, there's a value of about 500 million, which is basically, I mean, on the national news now in terms of what the business rescue practitioners have put in. I mean, that's what we've evidenced in terms of us acquiring the asset.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And how difficult is it to acquire an asset like this? What processes do you have to tick off besides the one that you've spoken about?
Well, I mean, an asset like this for us, I mean, all industry players, forever, most of the time, we spend time looking for an edge in assets. I mean, you know, an edge that gives us, you know, different plans in terms of moving our tons. I mean, the beauty about this asset, it comes with a rail siding, It comes with a washing plant. I mean, you know, and it's got a resource. I mean, the resource of about 250 million tons. I mean, for us, that was the biggest thing that got us attracted to this. And then I think for us, as an existing Eskom supplier and an exporter of coal, that adds into our portfolio in terms of moving the tons to South Africa and to countries like India, who are dependent on our coal in South Africa. Yeah.
So I was going to ask about which markets you wanted to service should this deal go through and be completed, and what kind of output capacity are you hoping to achieve once everything settles down and if the sale is completed?
Well, I mean, this asset, again, if you look at it, these are old assets. It's been around since 1971. I mean, and it's got a fantastic infrastructure in a sense that the allocation on itself at Richards Bay Coal Terminal, I mean, it takes about 1.6 million tons. So through that, I mean, how you look at the tons that are in there now, the coal predominant now will favor a lot of Eskom. I think I would say about 80% will go to assist our country, I mean, in its challenges in terms of energy security. And again, I mean, because of our funding options, some of the tons will be able to move to countries like India, Pakistan, and Vietnam, who are still dependent on coal. I mean, that's the role that we play. So it gave us that global play, I think, as a company.
And what of the men and the women who are working at the mine, who haven't received salaries since November last year, if I'm correct, and who are looking for work? What are your plans, if any, with them?
Well, I think as a company, LECO, I mean, we thrive on, I think, our biggest purpose in coming into sectors like this. These are sectors that create quite a lot of jobs. You know, I think for us, the first thing that I think that also touched us was how best can we add value to these people. I mean, you understand, I mean, they've been out of job now for quite some time, and I think the first thing that we want to do now is to bring all of them back, you know, and we're looking at about probably 1,005 people that indirectly and indirectly, you know, that could be able to affect, I mean, in terms of the jobs that we provide. But over and above that, I think, I mean, as modern miners now, I think the biggest emphasis now is the focus on safety. I think those are some of the things that we'll be focusing on and ensuring that the workers understand, I mean, the standards that have been laid by the department in terms of modern miners, you know, operating around safety standards and observing safety standards. And I think our employees as well, that will be taking on, you know, understanding the importance of safety going forward.
Okay, there's a conversation around the type of energy mix that we use, the use of coal, the sustainability of coal and the effects on the environment. As someone whose business is largely dependent on that, what are your views on that?
You know, the topic on climate change is a complex one. I mean, it's debated all over the world. You know, not only, I'm glad that you're asking the question today. I mean, you know, there was a big AGM of BHP Billiton in London. And then the debate is around the sustainability of coal. I think as a coal person, I still believe that coal is the cheapest, and I think there has to be a debate among all industry players, whether it's wind guys or solar guys, but I think we still have a role to play, because as coal players, we have our infrastructure. I mean, they still have to build their infrastructure. I think for us as coal players, one of the things that we're now embarking on is basically to find ways around how do we deal with emissions. You know, how do we deal with pollution? And I'm grateful that companies like Eskom that we're supplying are very quite strict as far as qualities are concerned. I mean, you know, and I think, and then there's a big drive in terms of us getting into to be responsible miners and to bring much cleaner energy. Because, I mean, the country still needs it in a sense that coal is still the cheapest form of energy. You know, as I said, I would debate that as a coal player. I know that, you know, my colleagues in the other sectors will have their views, but I think as a coal player, I still believe that we've got a lot of role to play, I think, in the sector for coming years.
I'm glad you brought up Eskom because, and I know that you are not a spokesperson for Eskom. I'm not asking you to speak on behalf of them.
Yeah.
What's the issue there with coal? If there are suppliers like yourself who's saying you're supplying Eskom with coal, what's the issue?
There's no issue. I think Eskom, you know, Eskom, like any other sectors, all of us are going through, we're all trying to find ways that can work. I mean, you must understand our industry is basically, you know, divided into various sectors. I mean, there's finance that is required. there's infrastructure that's required. So, you know, and Eskom as well, it's also at a stage. Remember, if you look at Eskom plants, they've been built over many years. So they're also finding themselves in the same challenge that we find ourselves as well as producers in terms of finding capital, in terms of, you know, renewing their plants or boilers. So I think there are conversations and there are changes and there are researches that are taking place on our side, I think on their side. So I think, and I think the guys, if I look at it, I mean, if you look at the past load shedding, I mean, the guys have put a lot of effort and in trying to make sure that the country has a lot of light. And I think also as LECO, that's the role that we are playing in terms of ensuring that there is energy security in our country. You know, and I think for me, I think it's a collaboration between us and Eskom in making sure that you know, we deliver sufficient energy for our country.
Well, energy security, job security. We also took some of these issues to the streets of Johannesburg, and this is what South Africans there had to say.
A Gupta family as a whole just brought our economy into a crash, into a downfall. Because when we look like as blacks South African citizens, most of us are poor, and we don't have a lot of resources that can benefit the whole South African citizens. As for instance, now we can go to rural areas. Many children are preparing to write the exams. It's going to have like maybe rainfalls, clouds. There's no bridges. There's no transport. Many students are suffering like to reach their destinations to go to school. Even you go to school, there's no material to study. Many students, they don't have like school shoes in the rural areas. There's no public services to the rural areas. We must not put the situation like of finance and the economy to the city as Joburg is old. Joburg is filled with cash, but let's take this thing back to where we're coming from. Our roots are just vanished just because of the Gupta's family. I'm not blaming Zuma, I'm just blaming the whole South African economy. South African economy, maybe they can try to make new things, to pull up with new strategies, but that will take time because it's a long term.
They misuse the funds, like public funds, and now there are many people now struggling to get jobs because of the corruption they left us in. Well, for my side, that I feel like the Guptas were not supposed to be here for the first place, if that taking money from the public was their agenda.
I think they came and they actually buggered this whole country up. A country that was fought by our leaders for liberation. And when we got the liberation, like our father Nelson Mandela fought for this country, and he tried to build this country up, but we find that people from other countries, like the Guptas from India, came and really tarnished the name of the country. They really interfered in our parliamentary rules and regulation, and they have really buggered this country up. I must say, because for what they did to this country, I wish that the law will imply all the rules and regulation and get these people behind bars and let them rot where they're supposed to be for making this country and making the people of this country suffer in the way we are suffering.
Hey there, Nana. I don't know if we can blame one family. Maybe we should also, each of us, stare into the mirror. In 2014, a 6-year-old grade R pupil from Chebeng outside Polokwane died after falling into a pit latrine at school. Michael Komapa's parents said they were disappointed that the Department of Education had responded in the manner in which it did. They then sued the department for nearly 3 million rand in 2018. The Polokwane High Court dismissed their 3 million rand claim for general health and constitutional damages. Now, the court ordered the Basic Education Department to pay only 12,000 rand towards future counselling for 2 of the Komapa's younger children.
I want to see justice being served because what happened to us is very painful. Our child fell into the toilet at school, and education authorities never visited us to comfort or discuss with us funeral arrangements. We buried him with donations.
The children must be protected. That is the right of each child. And that is the obligation of the Department of Education to protect our children at school. Therefore, we are here to ensure that justice is done, because Michael Komape was a child, a citizen of South Africa who needed to be protected.
Now, last month, rights lobby group Section 27 and the family of the toddler Michael Komape took the fight against the Department of Education to the Supreme Court of Appeals in Bloemfontein.
We've been representing them since 2014 when Michael died, and we approached the High Court. We were not very successful in the High Court, and so we decided together with the family to take things further to see if we can get some justice for the family. So the Supreme Court of Appeal heard an appeal that was about the damages claim for the family, as well as you know, in the High Court there was a structural order that talked about the broader issues around sanitation in the schools in Limpopo. And so the government actually does have to start improving the sanitation situation that led to the tragic death of Michael Komape, who was 5 years old, as you've said.
Yeah.
And I think what was so important about yesterday's hearing is that the family felt heard for the first time.
Yeah.
So their story was first and foremost to the judges. The judges were incredibly sympathetic to the circumstances of the Komape's death, to the grief that they felt, and to the injustice of the way in which the department had conducted itself, first by allowing children to attend school in such dilapidated state, and then at the time of the death, just the callousness of the state officials at that time.
Yeah.
And that was part of the conversation at court yesterday.
So 3 million rand is what the family are claiming. How is this amount settled on, or not settled on, decided on?
So, you know, what we asked for were general damages, which were in about 1 million rand. So that's about the pain and suffering, the emotional shock and psychological injury. It included counseling and future medical expenses. And then separately, we claimed 2 million rand in constitutional damages. And, you know, that's really a new area of our law. It hasn't been litigated that much. And so there was a great debate in court, in fact, about what that actually means. And, you know, at what stage do you get there? If you're compensated in terms of the common law, to the extent that the court feels is an adequate compensation, do you then go to constitutional damages? So that was a great debate amongst the judges and the lawyers yesterday, and we'll see what the court says. But the constitutional damages are really about relief for the violation of the right.
Indeed.
And the other part of it is kind of a deterrence to the state to make sure that that situation doesn't reoccur. And that they fix what has gone wrong that has led to the rights violation.
And yet it still continues. I mean, in 2019,
it still continues. 2019,
we're still sitting with pit toilets at schools.
We are sitting with pit toilets, very dangerous learning facilities for students and for learners. You know, and I think there has to be more attention and more outrage about this, because we cannot have 5-year-old children or children of any age in such a situation, and the judges were very alive to that fact. They talked about the disgusting state of the toilet. Justice Wallace said, can we even call it a toilet? You know, I don't think so. I think he was quite right.
Yeah.
And it's unacceptable.
It certainly is unacceptable. And what has been the response from the Department of Education to all of this?
So yesterday in court, the government was actually given a very short shrift. In fact, Judge Nafsa, who was presiding, asked the counsel for the state to take instructions from the state attorney who was in court and find out if they were in fact going to persist in defending this claim. And they decided in court in the moment not to proceed to say that they didn't think that there had been trauma and psychological injury to the family. They accepted that. So really it's a matter of the amount of compensation that the court will decide upon.
So now we wait for the outcome from the Supreme Court of Appeal. Any expectations there? Obviously it's not up to you to talk to the judgment, but when can we expect something from them?
Well, you know, this term is ending quite soon. We're told that, you know, from people who watch these things, that potentially in the next term, hopefully by the end of the year, we will have a judgment. And I think for the Komape family, it really, yesterday was there was a sense of relief because they felt that there was a listening, they were being heard, and there was a sense of relief from them. In fact, Mrs. Komape says, now I can rest, you know, because it's been incredibly traumatic for a very long time. And, you know, they have been stoic. But we continue to support them and support their well-being. Year after year, the Department of Basic Education is frequently unable to deliver textbooks to various schools on time. This came to a head in 2012 with the big textbook crisis that took place in Limpopo and various other provinces in the country. In 2016, parents in Guyana gathered to raise funds to source textbooks for their children.
A whole lot of information came out which showed that a couple of years prior to that 2012 year where all the problems happened, there had been a service provider that was appointed, and there were problems with that procurement and the tender and the way that that service provider was appointed.
Back in 2012, the community of Guyana were fed up with the lack of service from the government. They then took the government to court in an attempt to get them to provide textbooks in schools. Members of the community suspect that corruption took place. In December 2015, the Supreme Court of Appeal ordered the government to comply with the Act of Basic Education.
At one stage, our province was placed under administration, almost the entire province. The problem was starting from that. All the departments were not having money. So unfortunately, with education and health, that's where you could easily see that there are problems.
I just think that those who were delivering those textbooks, or those who were not delivering those two textbooks after having given a tender, they were capturing the state, and they were dealing or abusing the state funds.
Others believe that this occurrence is due to lack of governance.
The department was not running properly. I don't want to dwell much on politics, but if you were part of South Africa, you will know that some of the leaders who are leading now were part of the problems that we had that time.
We as managers, we were negatively affected in the sense that we were unable to run schools without textbooks. Not my school only. I'm referring to all schools ranging from Mupani, ranging from Skukuni, since we have traveled a lot to that area, and Capricorn district and the Waterberg districts. We find that there was serious damage.
Samantha Brenner, an attorney from Section 27, says that there needs to be proper steps taken to ensure that this kind of service delivery is better managed in the future.
There were allegations that 90% of the payment of the contract had been paid before any work had been done. There were allegations of undue influence in the bid adjudication committee. So the bid adjudication committee is the committee that decides who wins the tender ultimately. So there were all kinds of allegations of misconduct around the tender that were problematic. We think that there needs to be much more careful oversight and investigation and enforcement of these procurement procedures, particularly in respect of rights that are as important as the right to education, the right of access to health. Because these departments are so susceptible, there needs to be much more investigation and careful oversight of these procurement processes to make sure that this doesn't happen. Our submissions are with the Commission's investigators now. We've put it in detail before them. They've got it. They can read it. So what will happen with those is not clear yet. As long as it gets considered as part of the broader the broader discussion, it will be happy. But it is important that it is discussed, because it is an important part of this issue.
We want the department to practice the constitution of the country and not to ignore it.
The late delivery of stationery and textbooks to Limpopo schools seems to be an annual occurrence ever since the 2012 textbook crisis. 2 weeks into the 2019 academic year, various schools across the province reported to the SABC that they experienced serious shortages, particularly in the supply of books and stationery. Nothando Makutulela, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Welcome back. Now, people who were supposed to be beneficiaries of the controversial Estina Dairy Farm project are demanding a portion of the farm for grazing. They say they have not benefited since the inception of the project. The more than 220 million rand farm project linked to the Gupta family has been at the center of a corruption scandal.
The Friede Dairy project, aimed at empowering local black farmers, has been plagued with corruption allegations since its inception. Newspaper reports allege that 30 million in government funds intended for the project was instead laundered through Dubai and used to pay for the 2013 wedding ceremony of Vijay Gupta at Sun City, and was then accounted for as a business expense. The farm has been under a curator since the Hawks investigated earlier in the year. Beneficiaries say they are the biggest losers. They claim they have not benefited from a project meant to assist them and want to be allocated a portion of land.
They know how our place is poverty. You see, we don't have the work and then we don't have the farm. We were very happy that we are going to at least have only one farm.
We were promised that we would be beneficiaries of the farm. They told us even our children will be part of the project. Free State Development Corporation has been managing the project since November 2014.
The FDC is not the funder of this project. We are only the managers of this project. So we are limited as to what exactly we could do, and everything that we do, we have to do with the permission and with the agreement of the Department of Agriculture.
The dairy was established as a public-private partnership with Estina, a BEE company, as part of the Free State Provincial Government's agricultural project. Mohuma Mobu, Parliament Agriculture Portfolio Committee, visited the project as part of its oversight work.
Our main visit is to make sure that because there are a lot of investigation and movement, this project must not die and it must benefit the people of Friede.
The questions that I asked was linked to the fact that the management team has been here 4 years. It's a long time in a dairy cycle. I don't think they are progressing. My concern is that the cattle, looking at them today, and as I said, I'm definitely not a specialist. They look to me like they have diarrhea.
NPA maintains it has a strong case against the 8 accused in the Estina Dairy Farm project. The accused face, among others, fraud and corruption charges.
A former Democratic Alliance councillor of the Phumelele municipality in Friede Free State, Dr. Khadebe, has testified before the Commission of Inquiry into State Capture about how he was attacked by the then Agriculture MEC Mosebenzi Zwane's people for exposing corruption at the Estina Dairy Farm project.
Billed as the flagship project by the Free State government, but a former DA councillor from the local municipality says the Estina Dairy project was just a scam.
So help me God.
Dr. Khadebe described how council members were duped into leasing the 4,000-hectare land by then Agriculture MEC Mosebenzi Zwane in 2012.
They said the department has planned to inject 300 for the project. Then in extra, the department will give beneficiaries 100 million. They also said Estina will come with 500 million.
But that didn't happen.
I never seen any payment from the Department of Agriculture to the municipality, and which was supposed to be close to 1 million by that time.
But the controversies didn't end there. Radebe claims he later became a target of Zwane's henchmen after exposing the death of cattle at the farm.
I was attacked, then I was even sprayed with a paper spray on the eyes. They say that I'm disturbing the ANC from doing its work.
And more claims of police turning a blind eye.
The legal team must please follow this up as well. And I need to have report backs on all these instances where I've had evidence that the police or some law enforcement agencies don't appear to have conducted investigations in circumstances where they should have.
Meanwhile, a Freda businessman has placed the Gupta brothers at the construction of the controversial dairy project.
Kijk, daar was 3 Guptas. Dis nou familie van die grootkoppe.
There were 3 Guptas. That's now the heads of the family of the Guptas.
Dis nou hierdie 3 Guptas wat so in die koerante is wat nou. Julle weet wie dit. Dis van hulle familie.
Chair, it is these 3 Guptas which were mentioned in the media. Surely you know about them.
It can interrupt investment, it can reduce economic growth, it can restrict trade. Corruption is the most potent because it disproportionately affects the poor. According to Corruption Watch South Africa, various studies around the world indicate that corruption can increase levels of poverty and income inequality. And in some instances, it can be deadly. It weakens public institutions which are supposed to produce goods and services for the poor.
Corruption threatens sustainable economic development, ethical values and justice, and skews benefits in favor of the rich. According to the United Nations Global Pulse Initiative on monitoring the impact of economic crime and crisis on vulnerable populations, corruption has a devastating effect on the poor, even though it is a threat to all in society. It indicates that since the poor are more heavily dependent on government services, it makes ordinary people most vulnerable to corruption since it stalls service delivery, it delays infrastructure development, and adds costs like transport costs on the economically disadvantaged in our society. Many acts of corruption deprive citizens of constitutional and human rights.
Now that's where we have to leave it for tonight. Good night.